Good afternoon and welcome to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. I am Brittany Carper, joined today by Coach Helen Williams. And Coach, we are only 18 days away from the tip of college basketball. Before we hopped on here, I was watching some of the Alabama-Florida State game on YouTube, checking out that exhibition. And man, I don't know about you, but I'm just getting more and more excited as the day gets closer.
No, listen, before you know it, it'll be here. I cannot wait. And it's gonna be, I think, an exciting year. There's so many good teams, good players, and just really looking forward to it.
Yeah, certainly. I think all the exhibition season gets us a little bit of taste of, what's to come, and it always makes me laugh. There's always overreactions to every score you see and scrimmage you hear about.
Right,
But
right.
I know that the games are going to be phenomenal again this season. Really looking forward to that. And so today we have the privilege of diving into some mid-major conferences. Let's take start at the top here. We'll go into the A10. And so last year, they had a really, really good conference last year. I believe two teams in the NCAA tournament with George Mason and Richmond. But why don't you just, give us some takeaways from what you're seeing coming into the 25-26 season from the A10?
Yeah, well, I think Richmond in their preseason poll was rightfully picked first in the league. I mean, they are very well coached, a very disciplined team. Their offense is very smooth. It's patient. I'm gonna steal this from Christy Winter Scott. It's like paper cuts. You just little by little by little they destroy you. And I love the way that they play offense, but they're also with their spread offense and a few of the Princeton principles, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also very disciplined on defense, which I think people don't really pay attention to. So they've got Maggie Dugan coming back, and her big thing this year, she said, was to get quicker and to get stronger. Certainly, her basketball IQ is off the charts. Her passing is off the charts. A10 player of the year, average 17 points, 7 boards, 3.8 assists per game. So expect her to be kind of like the fulcrum of that offense. And a veteran presence for them. So last year they got to the NCAA tournament and did very well. I think for a mid-major team until they ran into UCLA. So I think they're going to be the number one team in the conference this year as well, but not without some competition.
Mm-hmm.
George Mason reloaded. They made history last year, went to the NCAA tournament for the first time. Vanessa Blair Lewis does a phenomenal job there. Lots of players from the DMV want to come back home and play for them now, and she's doing a tremendous job getting the community involved and better attendance. So last year, their mantra was "Believe Big," right? And so this year, their mantra is going to be "Believe Big Squared," which means they want to do everything that they did last year, but they want to be better. And I think her main focus is that they don't get complacent, right?
Yep.
Because they made the tournament and that's great, but now everybody else is going to get better, as well. So they're a team that's obviously going to be up there. They lost and this is the interesting thing about the Atlantic 10 conference. The common theme is that the transfers in that league transferred within the league.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really weird. It's like, well, you killed us last year, so come play for us this year. And a lot of the players are just moving around the same conference. And a lot of the coaches, Tamer Reese in particular, was like, hey, listen, this is a kid. So we take kids that are already familiar with the league and how to play in the teams, and so it's going to be to our advantage. So I think George Mason is going to do well. They lost. I want to make sure I say her name right. Taviana Habib to Rhode Island, who is just a three-level scorer, big
Okay.
guard who does a lot on both ends of the floor. but I think they've had a really good incoming class as well. They're like everybody else, transfers, a few freshmen here. At the mid-level, some of them are still taking freshmen. They're not exclusively taking transfers like at the Power 4 level. So Vanessa and her staff are fabulous. They do a great job, so I expect them to do well. One thing I thought was interesting is that Davidson was ranked 3rd in the
Mhm.
preseason, and, Gail Falk does a really good job there. They didn't lose anybody to the portal, which is unusual, and they were very, strategic about, who they brought in for, transfer. They call it targeted recruiting in
Yep.
terms of very specific, positions that they need, and then they brought in some freshmen as well. So they got a taste of what the postseason could be like, and kind of have a chip on their shoulder for how they ended the year last year. Wanted to do better, and so they have Sharice Dunn back and Katie Donovan back as well, and they're going to be a team I think to be reckoned with. It's just that nobody really talks about them very much.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you know about Davidson, but yeah, nobody really talks about them very much.
Yeah, I do, and I was really actually surprised to see him in the 3rd spot voted, there, but I think they're just that solid team, and when you don't, I think in this day and age, lose anyone to the portal, you're typically then looked at like, "Okay, we know what to expect from this team because they are who they are," right? Like you certainly those players are going to get better, but there's not so many unknowns. Like when you are taking a bunch of transfers and how are those pieces going to fit together. So why it might be surprising that they were 3rd, I think with just having that natural flow of season to season and the carryover is probably why you see them in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, they bring back their 2 leading scorers, Sharice Dunn and Katie Donovan, and the interesting thing is they're very aggressive with their schedule. They're playing 7 teams that played in the NCAA tournament, and the goal is to get an at-large bid. That's what Coach Falk wants, and so when you're, getting down to it, I mean, obviously to make the tournament, you have to win games, but you need eyes on you. And so the schedule that you have is part of that, and part of how you do you or don't you pass the eye test. I mean, that's part of it too. Obviously, people are going to look at numbers and wins and things like that. But when you're on that teetering on that line, it's in your mid level. It's like, do you pass the eye test? Can they compete against the top teams in the country? And so I thought it was interesting that they're going to play 7 teams that played in the tournament last year, and if anything, it will definitely get them ready for the conference play.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're seeing a lot more of these mid-major schools doing is trying to get out there and schedule as many quality opponents as they can because they know that okay, maybe it's not going to end up getting us an at-large bid, but it will do the best it can to prepare us for our conference season. And if we are able to win some of those games, it's a better position maybe for an at large, but then not even that, but maybe into the WBIT where you're getting a little bit more, now that that's a paid tournament in the postseason, like you're getting your expenses paid for in that. And so I think there is a challenge there of the mid major scheduling is to find that balance. But like you said, when you're returning and you know what your roster is, I think you can be a little bit more aggressive in the scheduling because you're trusting what you have. And just a note on that scheduling, I don't know if you saw Kara Lawson's tweet about saying, "Hey, I know that some Power Four conferences, teams say we'll play anyone everywhere, anywhere, and that's not always the case." And she
Right.
said, "If you need a game, call me and we'll come play you at your place." And I think that's from someone not only a great college head coach but coach of Team USA saying like, "Hey, I'm not scared to take my Power 4 team to a mid-major road game." And so I think that needs to be a little bit more of a two-way street where you do have some of those high majors willing to go play at some mid-major places because not only does it obviously benefit the mid-major, but it's also an environment that maybe they don't always get because they are bringing a higher level opponent in.
You know where that comes from? her coach, Pat Summitt, "I'm doing what's gonna grow the game,"
Yep.
right? You can bring Duke to a mid-level school. It's going to be great. The attendance is going to be great, and so kudos to her for that. So
Yep.
it'll be interesting to see what they, how they end up. But the team that I'm most intrigued about with is Rhode Island.
Mhm.
Um, Tammy Reese, God love her.
Yeah.
She is. I love doing her games. You go to games that you go to practice the day before shooting practice,
Hmm.
and she is the one coach that she if I'm there, the times that I've been there, she's not even in practice. Like, she's over there talking to me for the
Yeah.
whole for the whole time. Like, her coaches are coaching, which is obviously a good thing. You're allowing your coaches. But I'm in shooting practice, and we're talking during practice, and then she stays for another hour. I'm like, Tammy, I gotta go get ready for the game. But you get such great stuff for her. She's so geeked up for her team and for women's basketball. I just love doing her games, and I'm really excited for her. It didn't have a great year last year, but she's been able to build Rhode Island up,
Yep.
and she's built it up with foreign players, with international players. And I asked her a couple years ago when I did a game, I was like, "Why do you have so many international players?" And she said, "Helen, it's because when I took over the job, the American players wouldn't answer the phone." And I thought, well, hey, you got to go with what you need to go with. And so she has a connection to France. They have French players. They have players from all over the country. And then again, Habib from George Mason's gonna make them better. And I think she's a great coach, a great motivator. So I would not be surprised if they finished you know anywhere from 1 to 4. I mean, they have the ability, if they can stay healthy. That's been a big thing for them too. Um, and then the last team I want to talk about is St. Joe's, who obviously did really well last year. They lost a key player in Laura Siegler to Louisville. Louisville is happy to have her.
Yep.
She has, I like to use this word, exquisite footwork. She's a tremendous passer, really high basketball IQ, and she's going to do great things at Louisville. So that's a big loss for them, because when she was playing with St. Joe's, um, it helped them when they were playing Power Four schools. Like, they had a chance with her surrounding cast, if you will.
Yep.
So going to be interesting to see where St. Joe's ends up. Now, they picked them the league. They're sixth, and they picked Dayton to be fifth. So it'll be interesting to see where St. Joe's ends up.
Okay, is there any maybe bottom tiered team in the preseason poll that you think could be a dark horse that maybe comes in and snags a top 4 or 5 spot in the conference?
I would say bottom. I would say Dayton, to look
Okay.
out for them. I mean, this is the best team she's had um, all year. Or the time that she's been there, I would say that they're going to be somebody that you need to pay attention to. And then VCU they're sneaky. They're
Mhm.
sneaky. They have some, they've had foreign players as well. And I would not be surprised if they got a few that they weren't supposed to. So I would say the top seven, those last three, Dayton, St. Joe's, and VCU, could surprise some people.
Yeah, and just a mention too for Richmond, they are ranked preseason number 24 in the country, the only mid-major to appear in that poll. So certainly the expectations are high there for the Spiders once again. But I think we are going to see another phenomenal year in the A10, and definitely looking forward to following that action. The next league that we kind of touched on, if you want to go into the one that you kind of took a little bit more dive into the Ivy. They have not released any preseason poll, but I know you've done a little research into them, and so they were a 3-bid league last year for the first time ever, which again for a mid-major conference is absolutely phenomenal. And hopefully in this day and age of college basketball, it's something that we can continue to see, even though that landscape is getting a little bit harder for the mid majors. But just touch on what you think about the Ivy in this upcoming season.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of Ivy League. I coached at Princeton, so I'm a little bit biased in terms of leagues. I've always said that being great academically and being great athletically. They're not mutually exclusive, and the Ivy League is proof of that. I see them still being top heavy like they were last year. I still see Harvard, Princeton, and Columbia. Harvard, they finished 11-3 in conference play last year, made the tournament. Coach Kerry Moore, um, contract extension. Kudos to you, Coach.
Yep.
Be there through 2030. So that's always good when you know you're going to be there. But they lost Harmony Turner, who got drafted by Las Vegas Aces and is overseas playing now. They lost Elena Rodriguez, who's a very uh, the elbow was her home. They ran their offense through her. She could shoot threes, she could pass, she could handle the basketball in transition. So those are big losses. Their non-conference schedule includes Michigan, Alabama, Arkansas. So again, testing themselves against the Power Four teams. Um, but I think they still have a core there that played last year that went to the tournament. Sanaya Glenn Bello is a junior. She versatile player, going to have to take on more of a scoring role. Elena Rocco, Katie Krupa, Abigail Wright. I mean, these are players who were they came off the bench. It's not like they didn't play, but now it's going to be okay. We're going to really rely on you guys to do more because Harmony Turner's gone. She could get a bucket whenever she wanted, and same for Rodriguez. So I think it's going to be more by committee for Harvard, but I still think they're going to be very good. Princeton, Carla Berube, great coach, wins everywhere she goes.
Yep.
Love how she runs that program. They're going against Georgia Tech, Maryland, so they're testing themselves as well. They lost Caitlin Chin, who got drafted and was with the Golden State Valkyries. So, but they returned Madison St. Rose, another good player. So I think they're going to be kind of weird as it sounds. I think they're going to play with a chip on their shoulder,
Hmm.
right? Princeton's, they didn't finish first, and they had a few games that I think they would like to have back, right? Where their at-large bid was not necessarily within their control. So I think they would like to make sure this year that there's no question in terms of that. And then Columbia, I love Coach Megan. She is a fireball. Love watching her. Love listening to her. Very motivational. Small in stature, but mighty in
Hmm.
personality. Like when she steps into a room, as little as she is, the room stops and people listen to her. So love being around her. They lost Cecilia Collins and Kitty Henderson. They were a very physical team last year,
Yep.
especially with these two. So the question is, can they do that? I mean, I did a couple of their games and they just punched people in the mouth and you either fought back or you didn't. And most people didn't. So can they be as physical as they were last year? They're bringing back Riley Weiss, who's a great scorer, Perry Page, who's a great rebounder, Susie Raphew, who's a good scorer. Mia Broom is going to be key for them. She was the backup point guard last year as a freshman. Same personality as Coach Megan Griffith. I mean, just small in stature, but mighty in personality. And then the transfer that they had last year, Marija Avlias, great scorer as well. So I see them being top heavy and still being the top three. I will say that I think it's either going to be Princeton or Columbia. Forgive me, Harvard, and don't get mad at me. But
Mute
Harvard could,
this section.
yeah, I mean, Harvard could just as easily be in there as well. But I think it's going to be like it was last year, assuming everyone stays healthy,
Yep.
right? And you're able to win the games that you're supposed to win, especially at home, which was a big factor last year in the Ivy League. I think it's still going to be those top three teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was able to see both Harvard and Princeton in person last year, and just really high quality, high level teams. Like, and I agree with you about Harvard losing a player of Harmony Turner's caliber is really hard to replace. And I think yes, by committee is always what you hope happens. But I think in situations when you're in close games, you always knew who that ball was going to.
Yeah, yeah,
And
they knew she
and
was gonna see the bucket. Yep.
yeah, and so that's always the hard part, and that's what, the joy and beauty of coaching is navigating who that next Harmony Turner is on your team. But I think that's something that I think Harvard will figure out. They certainly have the capable pieces there. Princeton definitely, I think, has the core intact there to again be at the top of the league. And Columbia, like you said, always there, very physical, make you earn everything you get. And so, but I would be in agreement with you, definitely more of the top heavy there. Do you see kind of any other team making a little bit of a push, or you think that's kind of still that pretty divided top three there?
I mean, no, I
No.
don't. I mean, you look at Penn, they finished 4th last year, and they made the Ivy League Madness tournament, but I just think that Princeton, Harvard, and Columbia just do a really good job, and again, I'm a bit biased because I coached at Princeton,
Hmm.
of really attracting great athletes who can play, who happen to be smart, right?
Yep.
Their mentality, I've always said they have a D3 mentality with D1 budgets. They go after the best players. They don't just say, okay, well, we have to go after players who have good grades. They go after the best players, the same ones that Duke goes after, that Stanford goes after, Northwestern Cal. Like they're not going to dim their light by any stretch of the imagination. And so those three, and then Columbia, Megan Griffith has just done a tremendous job, for her alma mater. When she took over that job, people were like, Are you crazy?"
Hmm.
But she had a vision, and that vision has come to fruition. So now she has all three of these schools have expectations and standards, and all three of them put people in the pros. They all have people that are playing in the pros, overseas or whatever, and so they're legitimate contenders. Those three, I think, do a great job, and so for that reason too, I think it'll be still top heavy.
Yeah, I think again, certainly their expectations would be another three bid league for them, but will be another really fun season in the Ivy. And I think what's always great about what we talked about with the scheduling of all three of those programs is you do get to see them on the national stage early in the year, and typically not surprising when they upset one or two of those teams. So definitely excited to see them play. Um, Switching gears a little bit, I'm going to tackle a little two Midwest conferences. And so we're going to start with the Mid American Conference, otherwise known as the MAC.
Mac.
And
Shout out
last
to Western
year,
Michigan where I used to
yeah,
coach.
yeah, shout out there. New coach and Kate Actor there, very familiar with her. She was at Loyola and then Detroit Mercy, and so has taken over Western Michigan there. And they do have quite a bit of turnover on the coaching side in that league. But last year, Ball State won the regular season and the conference tournament. And then they also placed Toledo in the WBIT and then Buffalo and Miami of Ohio in the WNIT. So four postseason teams from that league. Um, Ball State, I'm going to start there just because they did win both. They lost their top seven scorers, and
Woo,
so
that's a lot.
yeah, that is a lot.
Let me ask
And
you this: the graduation or transferring?
graduation.
Okay.
Yes. So they were obviously a very senior heavy team. And it worked out really well for them. They won both and made it to the tournament. But they are such an unknown. They went very heavy international in their
Mm,
recruiting. And so I'm not going to sit here and talk about enough of that because I don't know enough about how those players will transition to the college game. But I certainly think, Coach Saley's done such an unbelievable job there that I am not going to discount them in where they might finish. But they do not have a preseason pullout, so it's kind of hard to gauge where they will end up. But then I just kind of wanted to highlight some teams that I thought might have a chance to kind of, move up or stay in the kind of top five there. I'm going to start with Toledo. They returned four players who played 10 or more minutes for them. And so I think they have a pretty good core there in place. They have their second leading scorer, I believe, back. And then they added five transfers. So, that's again going to be a little tricky to see where they kind of finish because again, when you're having 5 transfers, like we talked about, you do still see a lot of freshmen coming into these programs, but the transfer part of it is just a little bit difficult to know how they're going to gel, how they're going to mesh. But they did finish second last year, and then lost in that second round of the WBIT. And then the next one that I wanted to highlight was Kent State. Just really quickly on them, they returned 7 of their top 9. They finished in fourth, and so overall they were 21-12. I believe they opted out of postseason, if I remember correctly. At the end of last year, they chose not to play. Otherwise, I would have assumed they would have had a bid probably to the WNIT. But I think when you return 7 of 9 players, you're probably expecting a bit more coming into this season. Kind of like what we touched on with Davidson, just having that continuity from last season to this. Certainly the expectations I think for them are going to be able to rise a little bit. And then the other team I had, Miami of Ohio. They returned 3 starters. They lost in the second round of the WNIT. They have an all MAC honorable mention performer back in Amber Treader. And then I thought they added a pretty big piece, St. Thomas transfer, Amber Scalia. She's a 1,000-point scorer for St. Thomas, and she shot 34% from the three. So I think, again, they lost 3 starters, but they have a pretty good core back that I think they could, have that potential to move from that fifth place spot that they were last year.
Who's the sleeper team in the MAC that nobody's talking about that you think can make some noise?
The one that I picked is Central Michigan. And
Hmm.
so they went 14-17 last year. They were 9-9 in the conference. They had the freshman of the year who stayed. They returned another all freshman performer, and then they also returned 8 of their top 10. And
Hmm.
so to me, I see that as you were young, you were still fairly successful, finishing 9-9 in the conference. And then they added NAI, first team NAI All American, who had previous stops at Division 1. And so you're adding another scorer in Zaria Chevre. I could say that wrong, but I think they say Z is what they call her. But when you're adding again another, kind of firepower scorer from there, that was one that I thought was Central Michigan. And then the one that I think could surprise a lot of people, and you might be more familiar with them, but is UMass. And so they're coming into this league. They went 11-7 in the A10 last year, and they returned 4 starters, and 5 of their top 8. And so I don't know how much you watched them last year, but they have their top 3 scorers back. And so I just felt like that could be a team that can come into this league and really surprise some people from the start.
Yeah, and given the fact that you really don't, it's hard to see to know who's going to be where because of the transfer portal. It's sometimes hit or miss, and then coming into a new league. But that's a league that's probably only going to get one bid, so you've got to win that tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think they've had kind of those top spots. They've just had so much. I mean, like for instance, Buffalo, right? They finished second last year, then they went on to win the WNIT. They lost almost their complete roster. I think they had one returner back. And so and then I think there were 3 other coaching changes in that league at Northern Illinois, Western Michigan, Buffalo, and then I think I might be forgetting one. But again, when you see the turnover on the coaching side as well, you kind of expect a ton of roster turnover. And so, like we've touched on, when there is that much, it's so hard to know until these games start happening what we're really going to see, from a lot of these rosters.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is how much are they able to participate in the revenue sharing NIL, in terms of getting in getting players, and whether or not that's something that helps them or hurts them, it'll be interesting to see. I know it's a waste of time for me to try to put any boards together now. And through the summer, I used to do it in August, and I still haven't done it because I don't know who's going to be where.
Yeah, and that's why I think, now more than ever, some of those exhibition games are you want to get eyes on teams
Yep.
because that way you do have an idea of what to expect. Because right now, because there is so much movement at every level, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's power four, mid major. I mean, the rosters are looking completely new, and the coaches are also dealing with that, right? So they're trying to figure out, like, in basketball you do get a lot of time on the court with your team. You're starting in June for most programs. You're getting those 8 hours a week or whatever it is. Then you come, practice starts earlier and earlier every year, so you're starting middle September. But when you're every year adding possibly 7 8 new kids, and some of those are freshmen who have never played college basketball, like the time to see what your team actually looks like is so much longer, I think, in terms of what you're actually going to become, because you just have so many new pieces.
Yeah, it takes longer to gel, and whether it's freshmen or you're bringing in transfers who have habits and terms and things from their previous places, and trying to figure out. Literally, you have that short span of time that you're talking about to get players to buy in. Then you've got to get them after they buy in. You hopefully they buy in. Then you've got to get them to gel. Then you've got to get them to have some sort of chemistry together, and it's really difficult. The coaches that are coming up now have to have an entirely new philosophy about how they, run their programs. I think a lot of things have to be simplified. You can't be too intricate. I know a lot of coaches are going to the spread offense now, where it's you're reading as opposed to quote unquote running plays, and so it's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, it really is, and I think, you touched on some of the programs still bringing freshmen in, and I think there is a ton of value of that, especially at the mid-major level. But on the flip side of that, they haven't played college basketball, so the learning curve tends to be a bit steeper for them because of that. Whereas if you have transfers, regardless of where they played, they typically understand the expectations of the college game, the pace, the speed, the physicality, all the nuances that go into making what, college basketball players become. And so I think that is the tricky part in navigating and coaching now. So, we can be thankful we can just talk into the microphone about it, and,
Yes, I can
not
talk
have
about it.
to.
I don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then, just to wrap it up, I wanted to touch on one more conference, the Missouri Valley Conference. Last year, Murray State and Missouri State actually shared the conference title. Murray State went on to win the conference championship and make it to the NCAA tournament. Missouri State has since left. They joined the Conference USA, so they are no longer in the Valley. But they had four teams make the WBIT in Missouri State, Belmont, Drake, and UNI, and then Illinois State and University of Illinois Chicago make the WNIT. And so certainly a league. I think they ended up seventh overall in net from the conference perspective last year. I think it was, from my eyes, probably one of the deeper leagues that they've had, since I've really been watching it. But I just wanted to highlight a few teams that I think, have a chance to be kind of there at the end. I'm going to start off with Belmont. Splashville. They're always kind of on the national stage. They finished tied for third last year. They returned three of their starters and really good guards. They are very, very guard heavy. They have Jalen Banks, Tootie Jones, Emily LaChapelle, and then they added Tennessee transfer Avery Strickland to their lineup. And so they lost some 3-point shooting, and certainly I think she's going to provide that for them. I think the biggest unknown will be the front court for them,
Yep.
just
That's usually
because,
the case with Belmont. They're
yeah. And
always they're
so,
always guard heavy.
yeah, and they lost a really good player in Kendall Cheeseman, and then they had a backup post that was also very, very skilled and good for them. And so I think their guards are certainly good enough to probably win them a lot of games, but that will be something to watch over the course of the season. The second team, Murray State, the defending champions, they were second in the nation in scoring last year. They graduated Caitlin Young, who ended up 14th in all time in Division One scoring with 3,029 points, and so. Yeah, so they are a team that gets out and go. You've can go back and read. There's a lot of articles of kind of how Rochelle Turner really changed kind of what she did at Murray State. And so they've been a team that has just kind of evolved. They still have two very good guards on their roster that I think, again, will help them win a lot of games. They added a transfer in conference from Indiana State in Keslin Seacrest. But it's going to be hard to replace someone who scored 3,000 points in
Yeah.
their collegiate career, and to be second in the nation in scoring. So that is going to be really interesting to see if they change a little bit how they play, because Caitlin Young could step out and shoot the three, or she could go down and post you up. And she was just a really efficient scorer. So, that was that. The third one, this is kind of a combination, and it's two programs that's just a complete changing of the guard in the Drake Bulldogs and the UNI Panthers. They lost Drake to start with, lost two-time Valley Player of the Year in Katie Dinnebier. She had pretty much every statistical thing you could imagine for them. And so it'll be really interesting to see what they look like without her on the floor. She averaged, I think, almost 24 a game, led them, in assists, steals. She shot 50% from the floor, 40% from the three. I think she was a honorable mention All-American. And so for a mid-major player, just really incredible there. And then on, the flip side of that, UNI also lost, I believe, 6 seniors. And so just a really big changing of the guard for both of those two programs, who have historically been so good in this league. And so I'm just really interested to see kind of what, they are going to look like this year.
Do you consider those one of those two to be a sleeper?
I think it's hard to say right now because of the unknown pieces. Both of those programs had many 3 and 4 year starters. And so I don't know about them. The last kind of 2, 3 teams I wanted to touch on would be the Bradley Braves, Illinois State, and then UIC. I think those are kind of 3 teams too that are going to be in the mix there. Last year, Illinois State, they finished 5th. They lost in the WNIT Fab Four. They lost their leading scorer, Shannon Dallas. She transferred to Missouri, and so a really big loss for a wing player for them. A very dynamic guard. But they return both of their frontline starters in Nevaeh Thomas and Addie Martin, who I think, they were both top 10 in field goal percentage in the country. And so they certainly have some pieces there to build around. But I was actually joking with BMAC before we hopped on. It's probably been one of their younger teams in several years. And so, like we talked about, that's going to be something to watch as the season progresses. And then UIC, they lost. This is crazy, but they had 11 seniors last year.
Oh my
Which
goodness.
is kind of unheard of in college basketball. And so they have a completely new roster. They had one freshman last year who is still there, and then a guard who was actually in that group but redshirted because she was injured. But they added the NAIA scoring leader who averaged 31 and a half last year. And so that will be really interesting to kind of see. She started her career at Butler. Jessica Carruthers is her name, but then played 2 seasons at NAIA. So, certainly going to be interesting to see that jump. And then Bradley has just been that team that has steadily gotten better under Kate Popovich-Goss. And so they lost their leading scorer, from last season, but they've really figured out how to grind out games. That's really what they do to you, is just slow you down and kind of grind you out. And so, I think Bradley and UIC were kind of my sleeper teams that could maybe make that jump into the top half, more consistently. UIC's kind of been on the the fringe. Bradley was steadily getting there, but that's kind of where I see them.
And probably still a one bid lead too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do schedule hard out of conference most of these, but I think Belmont had the highest net last year, and I don't even think they were probably in the at-large conversations. And that's a tricky thing. We talked about scheduling. Is you have to schedule those games, but you also have to win probably a couple of them, which makes it difficult because you're almost always playing those on the road. But I know that some are returning back this year. I think Belmont is maybe hosting Duke. I want to say, but I know that they have a high level game coming into their place. But I think they are trying to challenge, everyone to keep scheduling harder to maybe have that possibility of more than a one bid league.
Gonna be an interesting year.
It is. I'm excited to dig more into college hoops. We are only, like we said, 18 days away from the start of the season. So keep tuning in every day. Hop on the pod, listen, watch, like, subscribe, follow us on all our social medias. We're certainly probably going to give our unsolicited opinions and advice for everyone out there, right, Coach?
And we're always right.
Always. That's the beauty of coaching from our seats or, wherever we choose to these days. All right,
Absolutely.
guys. Well, yeah, enjoy your Thursdays and we'll catch you next time.